Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. 6 hours ago, I stood alongside 12 other soldiers at Checkpoint Bravo, the final military blockade between what remained of civilization and the spreading infection. The crisp October air filled my lungs as I surveyed the fortified position we'd established just this morning on Highway 16, about 30 miles outside of Portland. Concrete barriers, razor wire, and 2 M2 Browning machine guns, all set up to hold the line against what command had described as violent infected individuals with highly contagious pathology. That was the official terminology. We all knew what they were. None of us wanted to say it. "Maddox, got a light?" Private First Class Alvarez approached, rifle slung across his chest, dark circles under his eyes betraying the sleepless night we'd spent as reports came in of the situation deteriorating rapidly. I handed him my Zippo, watching his hands tremble slightly as he lit his cigarette. The lighter's flame illuminated the worry lines etched into his young face. He couldn't have been older than 22. "Thanks, man." He exhaled a cloud of smoke that dispersed into the morning mist. "You think they're coming this way?" "Command wouldn't have us here if they weren't," I replied, scanning the highway stretching eastward, empty except for abandoned vehicles we'd pushed to the shoulders. My M4 felt reassuring against my body, though I wondered how much good it would do if the reports were accurate. Lieutenant Powell emerged from the command tent, walking with that rigid posture that seemed more pronounced under stress. His eyes met mine, and he gave me a subtle nod to join him. "Corporal Maddox," he began once we were out of earshot from the others, "just got off the radio with HQ. They're losing containment in Portland. Infection rate is accelerating." "How bad?" I asked, though the tightness in his expression already told me. "Bad enough that they're discussing whether to hold the city at all." Powell ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. "Listen, I'm not supposed to share this, but I trust you. If Portland falls, we're the last checkpoint before Salem, Eugene, and the whole Willamette Valley. Millions of people. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like lead. What about the National Guard units in Salem? The reserve battalions, already deployed to Portland and the surrounding suburbs. We're it, Maddox." He checked his watch. 0700 now. The next evac chopper is scheduled at 1900 hours. We just need to hold until then. 12 hours. It seemed manageable when he said it. We had the firepower, the position, the training. What we didn't fully understand yet was what we were truly up against. The first sign came around 0830. "Vehicle approaching," Specialist Novak called from his position at the eastern barrier. "Civilian SUV, moving fast." The black Suburban barreled toward our checkpoint at nearly 90 miles per hour, showing no signs of slowing. Standard procedure for approaching vehicles was clear. Warning shots, then disable if non-compliant. "Warning shots," Powell ordered. Novak fired a 3-round burst into the air. The vehicle kept coming. "Disable the vehicle!" Powell's voice carried over the sudden tension. I raised my rifle, aiming for the front tires, but hesitated when I saw a violent struggle inside the SUV. 2 figures grappled in the front seats, the driver fighting with a passenger who seemed to be attacking him, lunging at his neck while he desperately tried to maintain control of the speeding vehicle. Blood smeared the inside of the windshield. Novak and Alvarez fired simultaneously, hitting the front tires. The SUV swerved violently, flipping as it hit our concrete barriers at high speed. The crash reverberated through the quiet morning, metal grinding against concrete before the vehicle came to rest on its roof, wheels still spinning. For several seconds, no one moved. Then came the sound, a wet, gurgling moan from inside the wrecked vehicle. "Check for survivors," Powell ordered, but his hand signal told us to approach with caution. Private Weber and I moved forward, weapons raised. The smell hit me first. Copper and something else. Something rotten. Through the shattered driver's side window, I could see the driver hanging upside down, still strapped in his seatbelt. His neck was twisted severely from the crash, but his fingers twitched and clawed at the air. "Sir, he's still—" Weber trailed off as the driver turned toward us. Half the man's face was torn away, either from the crash or from the attack by his passenger, but his one remaining eye locked onto us with primal hunger. His mouth worked soundlessly, teeth snapping together. Despite his clearly broken body, he struggled against the seatbelt. "Jesus Christ," Weber whispered. The rear door of the SUV suddenly burst open. A figure lunged out, a woman in blood-soaked business attire. Her movements were rapid yet stilted, like a wind-up toy wound too tight. She rushed toward Weber with shocking speed. I didn't hesitate. 2 rounds to center mass, she stumbled but kept coming. "Head!" Staff Sergeant Fletcher shouted from behind us. "You have to hit the head!" My third shot caught her between the eyes. She collapsed mid-stride. By then, the driver had somehow torn free of his seatbelt and was crawling through the broken window, dragging himself forward despite injuries that should have left him immobile. His fingers dug into the asphalt, pulling his broken body toward us. Fletcher stepped forward and ended it with a single shot. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. We'd all seen combat in various deployments, but this was different. These weren't combatants or even civilians caught in crossfire. They were something else entirely. "Secure the vehicle," Powell ordered, his voice steadier than it had any right to be. "And get HQ on the radio. They need to know." Inside the SUV, we found nothing but more blood spattering every surface. The interior was soaked, especially the back seat. A cell phone on the passenger floor was still connected to a call, though the screen was cracked. When Fletcher picked it up, we could hear a faint voice on the other end begging for help. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please. My husband took our car. He was bitten. Started acting strange. Please." Fletcher's hand trembled as he answered. "Ma'am, this is Staff Sergeant Fletcher. U.S. Army. We've intercepted the vehicle at Checkpoint Bravo." A sob broke through the speaker. "Is anyone else there? Did you find anyone else?" Fletcher's eyes met mine, then scanned the empty vehicle again. "No, ma'am. Just the driver and one other infected individual. The woman's wail will haunt me for whatever remains of my life." While Fletcher tried to get more information from the woman, Powell received a transmission from HQ that changed everything. I could tell from his expression even before he called us together. "Portland has fallen," he announced without preamble. "The infection has spread beyond containment. Multiple military and police units have been overrun. They're establishing a new defensive line at Salem, but it's not ready yet." He looked at each of us. "Our orders are to hold this position at all costs. No one gets through. No one. Until the evac at 1900. "Lieutenant," Novak said, "what exactly are we dealing with here?" Powell hesitated, then decided we deserved the truth. "The CDC is calling it a prion disease with unprecedented spread, transmission through bodily fluids, primarily saliva and blood. Incubation period varies from minutes to hours depending on the severity of exposure. Once symptoms manifest, cognitive function deteriorates rapidly, leaving only base aggression and a compulsion to bite, thereby spreading the infection." "Zombies," Weber said quietly. "They're actually fucking zombies." No one corrected his language or his assessment. By 1,000 hours, the radio traffic had become sporadic and desperate. Reports of infection spreading throughout Portland and its suburbs, National Guard units being overwhelmed, civilians fleeing in panic. With each passing hour, the transmissions became fewer and more frantic. At 11:30, we spotted the first group of civilians approaching on foot from the east. About 30 people carrying what belongings they could, some supporting injured companions. Powell deployed us in a defensive line. "Remember your training," he said. "Check for bites or signs of infection. Anyone showing symptoms is to be isolated immediately." The group stopped about 50 yards from our position when Novak fired a warning shot into the air. "This is a military checkpoint," Powell announced through a bullhorn. "Approach slowly with hands visible. Anyone exhibiting symptoms of infection will not be permitted to pass." A man stepped forward, middle-aged, wearing a blood-stained police uniform. "I'm Officer Donovan, Portland PD. We've got women and children here. No one's infected, we've been checking each other regularly. The screening process was methodical but tense. Each civilian was checked for bites, scratches, or signs of fever. A few required more thorough examination, which Fletcher, our combat medic, conducted with grim efficiency. "They're clean," he confirmed after the last check. "We can't let them through," Powell said quietly to me and Fletcher. "Orders are to hold the line completely." "Sir, there are children," Fletcher protested. Powell's jaw tightened. "I know, but if even one infected person gets through..." A distant sound interrupted him, a cacophony of car horns, screeching tires, and something else. Something worse, like hundreds of voices moaning in hungry unison. "Contact east," Novak shouted. "Multiple vehicles approaching fast, behind them. Jesus, there's hundreds of them." Through my rifle scope, I saw the nightmare unfold. A convoy of civilian vehicles speeding toward us, pursued by a mass of figures that surged forward in a tide of ravenous desperation. The infected moved with a single-minded focus, pouring forward like water, finding the path of least resistance. "Get those civilians behind the barriers," Powell ordered. "Manning, Alvarez, on the Brownings now. Everyone else, defensive positions." The next few minutes were chaos. Civilian vehicles crashed into our barriers. People screamed, begged to be let through. And behind them, the horde approached, hundreds of infected drawn forward by raw animal instinct. Their collective sound raised the hair on my neck. Not groans or screams, but a terrible, eager hissing punctuated by snapping teeth. "Open fire!" Powell commanded, as the first wave of infected reached the abandoned vehicles. The Brownings roared to life, cutting down dozens in seconds. But there were always more. They climbed over their fallen, used the wrecked cars as cover, found gaps in our firing lines. Some wore civilian clothes, others police uniforms or medical scrubs, but all moved with the same mindless drive toward fresh prey. Through it all, I kept firing, controlled bursts, headshots whenever possible. The distinctive crack of my M4 became just one note in a symphony of gunfire. Brass casings piled at my feet. The smell of gunpowder mixed with something worse, the copper-sweet stench of blood and the putrid odor of the infected. "Ammo check," Powell shouted during a momentary lull. "3 mags. 2.5. 4 left." The responses came back in between bursts of fire. We'd been shooting for less than 20 minutes, and already our ammunition was running critically low. The evac was still hours away. Beside me, Weber cursed as his rifle clicked empty. He reached for another magazine, his hands shaking. "There's too many, Maddox," he said. "We can't hold them all." Before I could respond, a scream cut through the gunfire. One of the civilians, a teenage boy, was being dragged over a barrier by 3 infected. Fletcher rushed forward, firing precise shots that dropped 2 of them. The third sank its teeth into the boy's shoulder before Fletcher could kill it. "Man down!" Fletcher called, dragging the injured teenager back behind our lines. Blood pulsed from the bite wound. The boy's mother clutched him, sobbing while his younger sister watched in silent horror. "Get them back," Powell ordered, his voice tight. "Isolate the wounded." "He's just a kid," Fletcher argued. "He's infected," Powell snapped. "You know what happens next." The mother's wail carried over the battlefield as Fletcher guided them to a makeshift isolation area we'd established behind the command tent. I tried to shut out the sound, focusing instead on the approaching threat. The radio crackled to life, our first transmission in nearly an hour. "Checkpoint Bravo, this is command. Status report over." Powell grabbed the handset. "Command, this is Bravo. We are under heavy assault by infected, at least several hundred. Civilians present. Ammunition running low. Request immediate air support and supply drop. Over." Silence stretched for several seconds before the response came. "Negative on air support, Bravo. All assets are engaged at Salem perimeter. Evac still scheduled for 1900 hours. Hold your position at all costs. Command out." The transmission ended before Powell could respond. He stared at the dead radio, then at us, his expression hardening into resolve. "You heard them. We hold until evac." He looked at our dwindling group. 11 soldiers protecting 30 civilians against a seemingly endless horde. Manning, Alvarez, conserve Browning ammo for concentrated approaches. Everyone else, single shots, head only. Make every round count. As the afternoon wore on, the attacks came in waves. The infected seemed to operate on pure instinct, moments of frenzied assault followed by periods where they scattered, drawn to noises elsewhere, only to return in greater numbers. Each wave left us with less ammunition and often fewer defenders. We lost Novak at 13:45. He was reloading when an infected in a McDonald's uniform vaulted over our barricade. The thing's teeth clamped onto Novak's forearm before we could react. Wibber put them both down with a 3-round burst. Private Manning fell at 14:22, overwhelmed while trying to unjam the Eastern Browning. We couldn't even recover his body. With each loss, our perimeter shrank. The civilians huddled in an ever-tightening circle behind us. Among them, the bitten teenager had developed a raging fever, his mother still clutching him despite Fletcher's warnings. The boy's breathing had grown labored, his skin ashen. At 1600, Powell tried the radio again. No response except static. The lieutenant's composed exterior had begun to crack, revealed in the tremor of his hands and the hollowness in his eyes. "They're coming back," Alvarez shouted from his position. Through gaps in the barricade, I could see them gathering. Dozens becoming hundreds, some fresh, others bearing wounds from our previous engagements. The crowd of infected writhed like a single organism, pulsing forward with primitive, insatiable need. "Last stand, people," Powell said quietly. "Conserve ammo, wait until they're close." The horde surged forward, and once again we met them with disciplined fire. I dropped 5 with my first magazine, each shot finding its mark. My second magazine accounted for 7 more. Halfway through my third magazine, my last full one, I heard Alvarez scream. 3 infected had pulled him halfway over a barrier. His rifle clattered to the ground as he fought them with his combat knife. I rushed toward him, firing as I moved. 2 infected dropped, but the third had already torn into Alvarez's neck. Blood splattered across my face as I killed the last infected. But I was too late to save him. Our eyes met. He mouthed something, perhaps run or maybe sorry, before raising his sidearm to his own temple. I turned away at the sound of the shot, wiping the infected's blood from my eyes. The western flank collapsed minutes later. Infected poured through the gap, forcing us into a tighter circle around the civilians. Private Weber fell next, then Specialist Jackson. When Lieutenant Powell took a bite to the shoulder while protecting a young mother, I knew our position was lost. "Fall back to the command tent," I shouted, assuming control as the highest-ranking soldier still standing. "Grab what ammo you can." The sun was setting as we retreated, casting long shadows across the overrun checkpoint. 7 soldiers remained, protecting 26 civilians. Behind the command tent was a small drainage culvert. Not ideal, but defensible with our dwindling numbers. "The radio," Powell gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Try again." I keyed the handset. "Command, this is Checkpoint Bravo. Lieutenant Powell is wounded. Most of our defensive line is overrun. Requesting immediate evac or support, over." Through static, a voice emerged. "Bravo, this is Command. Evac still scheduled for 1900 at original coordinates. No additional support available. Hold your position. Over." Powell laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Hold our position," he repeated. "With what?" I did a quick inventory. Between the 7 remaining soldiers, we had less than 10 full magazines for our rifles, a few sidearms with limited ammunition, and whatever bladed weapons we carried. The civilian police officer, Donovan, had a shotgun with 6 shells remaining. "We can make it," I insisted, though I didn't believe it myself. "Evacs in less than 3 hours. We just need to." A scream from the civilian group cut me off. The bitten teenager had finally turned. His eyes had gone vacant, his movements transformed into the same predatory stalking we'd seen in all the infected. Before anyone could react, he sank his teeth into his mother's throat. Chaos erupted. I raised my rifle, but Fletcher knocked it aside. "They're clustered too tight," he shouted. "You'll hit the civilians." Officer Donovan acted instead, firing a shotgun blast that took down both the turned teenager and, tragically, his already fatally wounded mother. The sister screamed, a sound of pure anguish that seemed to carry across the battlefield, and the infected responded to it. Every head turned our direction. "Get everyone into the culvert," I ordered as the horde began to move toward our position. "Now!" Darkness had fallen by the time we established our final defensive position. The culvert offered only one entrance to defend, but it was little more than a concrete tube, 30 feet long and just tall enough to crouch in. The civilians pressed to the back while we formed a firing line at the entrance. Lieutenant Powell sat propped against the concrete wall, his condition deteriorating rapidly. Fletcher had bandaged his wound, but we all knew the inevitable outcome. "Maddox," Powell called weakly. "The evac coordinates." I knelt beside him, conscious of the moans growing louder outside our shelter. "It's not coming here," he whispered. "The coordinates. They're half a mile west, small clearing just off the highway." He pressed a GPS unit into my hand. "Get these people there." Before I could respond, the first infected appeared at the culvert entrance. Fletcher and Private Dawson opened fire, their muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the twisted faces of our pursuers. "Go now," Powell urged. "I'll buy you time." I looked into his eyes and saw that he'd already accepted his fate. "Sir, that's an order." "Corporal." He drew his sidearm with his good hand. "Western exit leads to a maintenance access road, small but passable. Get them to that clearing." Fletcher gave me a grim nod. We both knew what had to happen. I gathered the remaining soldiers and civilians, explaining the plan in hurried whispers. Officer Donovan would lead them through the western exit while we provided covering fire. From there, they'd follow the maintenance road to the evacuation point. "What about you guys?" a woman asked, clutching her young daughter. "We'll be right behind you," I lied, meeting Fletcher's knowing gaze. As the civilians prepared to move, I returned to Powell. His skin had grown pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the October chill. "It's been an honor, sir," I said, clasping his good hand. He nodded weakly. "Maddox." When I turned, he left the rest unsaid, but I understood. "I'll make it quick," I promised. The evacuation began at 18:30. I positioned Fletcher and Dawson at the culvert entrance, laying down suppressive fire while the civilians slipped out the western exit with Donovan. Private Keller and Specialist Grant went with them as escorts, leaving just 3 of us at the entrance with Powell. The infected pressed forward relentlessly. We dropped them one by one, but ammunition was critically low. When Fletcher's rifle clicked empty, he switched to his combat knife, stabbing through the eye socket of an infected that had gotten too close. "Last mag," Dawson announced, ejecting his spent magazine and slapping in his final one. I checked my own, 5 rounds left, +7 in my sidearm. "Go," Powell ordered, his voice barely audible now. "Get to the evac point." I looked at him one last time, then at Fletcher and Dawson. "Fall back to the western exit. I'll be right behind you." They hesitated, but another surge of infected forced their hand. As they retreated, I knelt beside Powell. "Is it time?" he asked, his eyes fever bright. I nodded, unable to speak. "Tell them," he struggled. "Tell them we held the line as long as we could." "I will, sir." He closed his eyes. "Do it." I pressed my sidearm to his temple and pulled the trigger. In the confined space, the sound was deafening, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. More infected were pouring into the culvert entrance. I fired my remaining rifle rounds, then my pistol, creating a momentary gap. Then I ran for the western exit, the moans of the pursuing horde following close behind. I was halfway to the exit when the concrete beneath me crumbled. I went down hard, my pistol skittering across the floor, my leg trapped in the collapsed section. An infected had crawled along the culvert floor and was reaching for me. I kicked desperately at its face, keeping it at bay. "Maddox!" Fletcher called from the exit. I could see him raising his rifle. "No," I shouted. "Get them to the evac point, that's an order." Another infected approached from the side. I managed to pull my combat knife and drive it into its eye socket, but more were coming. too many, and my leg was still trapped. "Go!" I screamed as I fought. "Complete the mission!" I saw indecision in Fletcher's eyes, but Dawson pulled him back. They disappeared from the exit, leaving me alone with the infected that poured into the culvert. As I fought in the darkness, I found myself oddly calm. We were supposed to hold the line, a final defense against the outbreak. We had orders, we had weapons, we had hope. Then the radio went silent. One by one, I watched my squad fall. Some were torn apart, some turned. The artillery ran dry. The last evac chopper would never come for me. And now, as the infected swarm around me and my ammunition runs dry, I realize I am truly alone. We held the line as long as we could. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But maybe, just maybe, the others will make it to that clearing in time. Pain dragged me back to consciousness. Complete darkness surrounded me, broken only by thin shafts of light filtering through cracks in the debris. My leg throbbed where it had been trapped in the collapse. But I was alive. The tunnel had caved in during my fight with the infected. By some miracle, the collapse had created a barrier between me and them. I could still hear their muffled moans on the other side, but the concrete and steel that pinned my leg also protected me from their reach. My watch read 1907 hours. The evacuation was scheduled for 1900. I'd been unconscious for nearly half an hour. I fumbled for my radio, finding it somehow intact despite everything. Static filled the channel as I tried to reach Fletcher or anyone from my unit. In the background, I caught the distant sound that made my heart leap. Helicopter rotors. "This is Corporal Maddox at Checkpoint Bravo," I called into the radio. "I'm trapped in the service culvert. The evac chopper, I can hear it. Does anyone copy?" The static crackled, then broke. "Maddox? Jesus Christ, you're alive!" Fletcher's voice, strained but unmistakable. "We're boarding the chopper now. They only waited because Dawson wouldn't shut up about going back for you." The sound of rotors grew louder overhead, then began to fade. Relief washed over me. They'd made it out. The civilians, my fellow soldiers, they were safe. But that relief was quickly tempered by my own reality. "Can you tell them my position? I'm trapped but secure. The infected can't reach me." A long pause followed. Too long. "Maddox, they're not coming back. Command's been clear. This was the last flight out. They almost didn't send this one." I felt hollow. "What's the situation?" "Bad. Really bad." Fletcher's voice faded in and out as the chopper gained distance. Salem's perimeter was breached 2 hours ago. Portland's gone. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, all overrun. They're abandoning the entire West Coast. "There must be some safe zone left," I insisted. "Somewhere they're evacuating people to." Another long pause. The infection, it's spreading too fast. It's military's falling back to the Rockies trying to establish a new line there, but Static cut him off momentarily, saying it's already too late. Command's gone dark. Chain of commands falling apart everywhere. The helicopter sound had faded completely now. I was truly alone. "What about you? Where are they taking you?" "Some facility in Nevada, underground bunker. But Maddox, they're not taking many civilians. Just key personnel, military, scientists, everyone else." His voice trailed off. I understood the implication. The world was collapsing and only a chosen few would find safety. "Fletcher, listen to me. I'm ordering you to survive this. Whatever happens, whatever you have to do, that's your mission now." "Roger that," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Same goes for you, though you always were too stubborn to die properly." The static grew stronger as the helicopter moved beyond range. "Maddox, His voice cut out completely, leaving me with only the static and the muffled sounds of the infected. I leaned back against the concrete, taking stock of my situation. Leg trapped, but not crushed. Some water in my canteen. A few protein bars in my pocket. The radio, though its usefulness was questionable now. For hours, I scanned through frequencies, searching for any transmissions. What I found only confirmed Fletcher's assessment. Emergency broadcasts spoke of containment failures across the continent. Military channels reported retreats from one defensive line after another. Civilian frequencies carried desperate pleas for help that would never come. One transmission, from what sounded like a National Guard unit, cut through the static with terrible clarity. All units fall back to designated safe zones. Repeat, all units fall back. Western containment has failed completely. Eastern seaboard reporting multiple outbreak clusters. There are no recovery missions authorized. If you're beyond the line, you're on your own. Night fell, marked only by the dimming of light through the cracks above. The infected continued their relentless moaning from beyond the debris, a constant reminder of what awaited me if I somehow freed myself. We were supposed to hold the line, a final defense against the outbreak. We had orders, we had weapons, we had hope. Then the radio went silent. One by one, I had watched my squad fall. Some were torn apart, some turned. The artillery ran dry. The last evac chopper had come and gone. And now I am alone, hours trapped in darkness. My leg had gone from painful to numb, a bad sign. But my immediate concern lay elsewhere. The barricade of collapsed concrete that had protected me was shifting. The infected had been relentless, their moans a constant backdrop to my isolation. Now their persistence was paying off. Small chunks of debris tumbled inward as decaying hands clawed through newly formed gaps. I checked my remaining supplies. Half a canteen of water, 1 protein bar, 3 rounds in my sidearm. Not enough. My radio had gone silent hours ago, its battery finally surrendering. The last transmission I'd heard described the fall of the Rocky Mountain defensive line, the military's final stand. No safe zones remained, no rescue operations, no hope. A pale gray hand pushed through the widening hole, fingers grasping blindly. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying to free my trapped leg one final time. The debris shifted slightly, but refused to release me. I drew my pistol as the first infected squeezed through the gap. In the beam of my dying flashlight, I could see it had once been a woman. Perhaps a mother, a doctor, someone with a life before all this. Now it was just a vessel for the infection, driven by insatiable hunger. My first shot caught it in the forehead, dropping it instantly. The sound echoed in the confined space, drawing more excited moans from the other side. The gap was wider now. They would pour through soon. I tried the radio one last time. "This is Corporal Maddox at Checkpoint Bravo. If anyone can hear this, we tried. We held the line as long as we could." More concrete shifted. 2 infected pushed through simultaneously. My second shot took one down, but the other lunged forward, teeth snapping. I drove my combat knife up through its jaw, the blade emerging through the top of its skull. It collapsed on top of me, its weight pinning my arms momentarily. By the time I shoved it aside, 3 more had entered. I kicked at them with my free leg, keeping them at bay while I retrieved my pistol. 1 shot left, 5 infected in the chamber with me, more pushing through the gap. This was it, the end of the line. I raised the pistol, considering my options. 1 infected would fall to my last bullet. The rest would reach me, and I'd join the ranks of the walking dead, unless I used that final round differently. My finger tightened on the trigger. Then I heard it, faint but unmistakable. Gunfire from the other side of the debris field, followed by the distinctive sound of suppressed weapons. The infected at the gap turned toward this new threat, momentarily forgetting me. Controlled bursts of automatic fire erupted. The infected dropped one by one. Someone was out there. "In here!" I shouted, hope surging despite everything I knew about the fallen defensive lines. "I'm trapped in here." The gunfire stopped. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of boots crunching over debris. Then a voice. "We've got a survivor. Bring the hydraulic jack." Light flooded through the widening gap as the remaining infected were systematically eliminated. A figure in tactical gear pushed through, face hidden behind a gas mask and night vision goggles. "Corporal Maddox?" The voice was muffled by the mask. "We picked up your transmission. Hold tight, we're getting you out." More figures poured in, working to free my trapped leg as another provided medical attention. Their uniforms bore no insignia, their gear a mix of military and civilian. "Who are you?" I asked as they lifted me onto a makeshift stretcher. I thought all rescue operations were suspended. The leader removed their gas mask, revealing a face I recognized. Fletcher, scarred but alive. They were, he replied. This isn't official. Just some stubborn soldiers who don't leave their own behind. As they carried me from my concrete prison, I glimpsed the world outside. Dawn was breaking over a landscape forever changed. Fletcher checked his weapon as his team loaded me into a waiting vehicle. The engine rumbled to life. Hope. That dangerous, persistent emotion flared in my chest for the first time in days. We'd failed to hold the line. But perhaps the war wasn't over yet. As we drove away from Checkpoint Bravo for the final time, I watched the infected through the rear window. They stood motionless, as if confused by our departure. "Where are we going?" I asked. Fletcher's expression was grim but determined. To find the next line to hold.